how do you see the market share for GM at the moment?
Well, market share overall, we had a pretty terrific quarter overall, including internal combustion. We finished on top of the market in terms of retail as well as fleet. We're very proud of that. But to the point of your question, it's the first quarter that we broke through 20,000 electric vehicle sales. So, and that comes in a year where we see it as a breakout opportunity for us. And the reason that I say that is our Ultium battery plants are just coming online in Lordstown, Ohio, and then later on in Spring Hill in Tennessee, and then in Michigan at the same time as we start to increase production of Cadillac Lyriq and the Hummer truck and SUV, and we have several launches right behind that, so we see it as a sign to come.
Dig in though, the Lyriq sales less than 1,000.
Yeah.
What was it, 2 Hummer EV pickups in the quarter? Yeah. When do these numbers become really real, really tangible?
Very soon. We're starting to see Lyriq shipments from the factory and in the pipeline increase dramatically. And then beyond that, we have a very solid order bank and committed customers in the thousands. So very excited about that opportunity.
Hey, Steve, Caroline asked a key point, which is within that 20,000 EV number, a lot of that was Chevy Bolt. It doesn't reflect the new models. Give me granularity. Give me numbers on the production output currently for the next-gen Ultium models and how that ramps through the year.
Well, if I take the 20,000 that we did in the first quarter, we see that growing to 50,000 by the end of June, and then doubling again by the end of the year. And the growth within that will be 100% plus of Lyriq and Hummer and Blazer and Equinox and beyond that. Bolt and Bolt EUV has done a tremendous job for us, particularly in the affordable EV part of the market, but where we see the huge volume opportunity is in the latter products that I mentioned. And that continues to grow into 24, where we see ourselves at the end of that time frame, kind of into the million range. So, but just to scale it, another growing to 50,000 in the second quarter, and then to 100 by the end of the year.
And Steve, to be clear, that 50,000 to 100,000, that's driven by new generation models, not just a ramp in Bolt.
That's correct. It's driven by Ultium-based models like Lyriq and Hummer and Blazer and Equinox and so on. Yes. Steve,
are you taking market share from Tesla?
Well, we believe so. Our share of the EV market has grown to 8 or 9% just in the past several months. And as we look at the share of our competitors, including Tesla, we would appear to be gaining across the board. And we see that in our reservations and our trade-ins. I mentioned Lyriq. When we look at trades and the like of that, we see a preponderance of our competitors in that mix. So a lot of plus business for General Motors, particularly in markets where we've been admittedly challenged, the so-called smile states, including California, where we appear to be over-indexing when it comes to EV sales, and that comes at the expense of some of those that we've just talked about.
And that's the next question, isn't it? Caroline, we're thinking about the impacts of regulation, the impacts of government here. Yeah. Steve just said California is where all the energy's at. So what happens when the IRA kicks in, right?
Yeah, Inflation Reduction Act. What does that mean in terms of, well, people's ability to be able to afford more cars? But ultimately, Steve, what about commercial vehicles here as well? Because you've got BrightDrop, the electric commercial vans. Is that in any way going to be helped by the government focus on the IRA in particular?
Yeah, for sure. And just to back up, on California, I use that as an example. That's true across the country in terms of how we're over-indexing. But when it comes to IRA, we feel as though we're very well positioned, including the announcements that were made late in the week last week. And the reason that I say that is how we've sourced the battery raw materials and the processing and the post-processing. Yeah. So we feel as though most of our models will qualify for that treatment, which can only help the demand side, including on the commercial side of the business. We've had very good uptake on the BrightDrop business, for instance, and we're looking forward to. We're down in that plant right now, retooling for even higher volumes. So we see terrific opportunity there.
Talk to us about ramp, about volumes, about shortages, particularly in chips, that many auto companies faced.
Well, the chip situation, I'd say, is normalized to a great degree. We still get in and out of that on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week basis, but our availability, if I measured it in percent of production, last year, if we ran kind of in the high 80s, low 90s of available capacity, we're much closer to 100 this year, and that's a reflection. And it's a mix now. It's gone beyond chips. Logistics factors in to a much greater degree this year. So it's just those challenges that we manage day to day, which is why, you know, we're pretty happy with our performance so far, and that we can continue to gain share, whether it's internal combustion engines or electric vehicles, particularly as we're in this very rich launch cadence.
Steve, we're coming off a strong quarter for new US car sales, right? There's evidence there was pent-up demand, higher rates, concern about the duress the consumer's under. What is kind of GM's economic outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, I'll speak directly to the industry. We finished the third quarter kind of in the 15.3 million unit range, and we would see that holding and perhaps accelerating a little bit through the end of the year. At the same time as transaction prices are also holding, incentives are staying at moderate levels, dealer grosses appear to be stable, used car prices stable. So all those ingredients to continue on a glide path of good performance we see there. So you know, we're anxious to see what we see through the first quarter is to help inform what we see through the rest of the year. But in that on top of, we have some terrific launches, as I've mentioned, whether it's internal combustion or EVs. So we're feeling pretty good about 2023.